All right. Well, good evening, everybody that may be listening. My name's David Young with the Boot Brisbane campaign up here in Cairns. And with me this evening is the head coordinator of Boot Brisbane, as always, Bill Bates. Bill, good evening to you.
Good evening, David.
Excellent. And our special guest for this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is a man who's been a strong advocate and supporter of the idea of Central and North Queensland becoming our own state, not just for the benefits of being able to redistribute the wealth that is created in our regions more fairly to the area where they come from, but also for the fact that we should have a better decision in the way that we lead our lives. And our special guest is John Wharton, who is the Mayor of Richmond. John, good evening, and thank you for taking time out of what would be a busy week, a busy time of the year, to spend some time with us to have a chat. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, David and Bill. Thanks for the invitation. I look forward to the discussion tonight. I've always got a bit to say about things in the region I live in, so happy to participate.
Yes, as we all should, mate. We should all want a better life and a better future for our children and everybody in our general community. And that's one of the best things about what a new state could afford, especially for the people in more remote areas like Richmond, like Mount Isa, anywhere west and very deep north. Guys, we might as well start tonight's discussion about the fact that the front page of the Townsville Bulletin had the one and only Jenny Hill coming out of the closet, so to speak, to say she's a strong supporter of the idea that we should have self-governance through a new state. Look, many people are speculative as to whether or not that's 100% genuine, but nonetheless, there she is on the front page. John, as a mayor yourself and now having a fellow ally and a leader of local government, what are your thoughts on the fact that Jenny's now come out saying she's a supporter? Obviously all supporters are welcomed, but is it too late for somebody that's probably not stayed on the sidelines for too long?
No, it's never too late, I don't think, David.
Of course.
And I said this a number of years ago when we had a meeting in Ingham and a couple of other meetings we had across the north about a new state for the north. Look, I think Jenny, she's elected now. She probably went into the election, covering all bases, but she's always been a regional person, and she's a good friend of mine. I'll declare that right from the beginning. I get on very well with Jenny Hill, and Townsville is her buddy, as far as I'm concerned anyway, when I see what goes on. Townsville in the north, she's on the policy committee for the LGAQ. She fights and stands up for smaller councils in remote and rural Australia and in Queensland on the LGAQ, but whatever we do in Queensland reciprocates right across Australia, because we probably do have the leading local government association in Australia. So I'm really pleased to see that today, and I can tell you, I was just in Canberra a couple of days ago, and there's another couple of very senior senators that are talking the same language on the other side of politics to Jenny. So, look, we're getting a bit of momentum up here, and I think finally people can see the light. I saw the light a long time ago when we were losing a lot of money, and mainly through the financial assistance grants to local government. Back in 2014, Joe Hockey froze the financial assistance grants to local government, and remote and rural Australia creates a lot of GDP. So I had to talk to Joe about this in Canberra, and he said, nice fellow Joe, I liked him, but he said, it's all right, John, we'll look after you. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, Joe, Infrastructure Australia in 2014 or 15, I just can't remember the year, but they did the economics on the Townsville to Mount Isa corridor, the highway and the railway line, and it was creating $15 billion in GDP for the nation. So that was the highest in the nation at the time, apart from the Pilbara. So, when you've got 15 billion in GDP coming out of a 1,000-kilometre corridor, people don't understand that. And you're going into a port. The port of Townsville is the only port on the east coast you can run a triple road train or an AB quad. There is no other port on the east coast of Australia that you can run in with that configuration. And it all comes from the area we live in. And, I think we don't talk about that enough, the GDP that we create. So when you talk about a northern state, and I heard all the knockers about it, and I think the Minister, Andrew Fraser, I think it was his name, was as Treasurer a number of years ago and said, oh, we could never afford to. They could never afford to lose us. Don't worry about that. And, it's, you know, there's a lot of what would you call it, fairy words, I suppose. We've got the economics, we've got the figures, you know, you guys have been doing the figures, and it stands there black and white. And why shouldn't we? We've got more people in Tasmania, and they've got 12 senators, and we got the same for our whole of Queensland.
It's a fair point. I mean, at what point? I mean, the biggest one you could say is economic output on its own right. We punch well above our weight from the rest of the nation, but when you can whittle it down to facts and figures, you could say to somebody that says it's not a great idea. You could literally just have 10 different points and say them one at a time. Do you realise how much we make per capita? Oh, it doesn't matter. Do you realise this? Do you realise this? Oh, at one point, you have to say to the person, you do realise it's almost as if you're being stubborn for no particular reason, because every single one of those points should make you want to go, we need to be our own state. Because when you have a small territory of Tasmania, a small state, I apologise, as Tasmania having over-representation as they do, both in the Senate as well as locally, I mean, it's absurd that we should be in 2020 and still dealing with a political system that was, you know, fabricated under the premise of a population being distributed as was 120 years ago. But look, I guess that's fundamentally the point of why we need to push that. And the more people that come on board, just like Jenny Hill has, the better. And look, I'm sure as a leader of their local community in Townsville, she's not going to be the last, because I'm sure as the government's state government represents themselves with bureaucrats in the southeast corner, as well as making it harder for the people of regional Queensland to just go about their daily lives, I dare say they'll come in droves. It might be a slow trickle over the years, but obviously the sooner that people wake up to this, the better. And good on Jenny Hill for coming aboard and being very clear about it. Look, we should mention quickly as well, John, that I think it was 2010. You were the leader. You put to the was it the LGAQ about actually proposing that all the councils unite on the idea of creating a new state. Was that correct? All the way back to 2010?
Yeah. It was about that. I think it was in Mackay. It was a local government conference, and so we put a motion. We had enough of fighting with Brisbane, you know, and trying to get some funding back into our region for roads and water and all those necessary things if you're going to build any sort of economic community. And anyway, so we took the motion to the local government of Queensland State Conference in Mackay, and we missed out by 12 votes. And I can tell you now, it was to tell you how people think about the North Queensland state. The councillor of Gympie put their hand up and said, we want to be in the North Queensland state too. And I said, I think you've drawn the wrong bow there, mate. But that's the impression of southeast Queensland, where and honestly, like Brisbane City gets 20 votes, all those big shires down there, Redland, Toowoomba, and Wharton Bay, they all get a lot of votes, and most councils get 2, and I think Townsville gets about 6. So we lost by 12 votes. We nearly got it. And I can tell you now, the LGAQ were lobbying very strongly at that conference against the motion, because they were worried that they were going to lose the power base of all those councils north of Tropical Capricorn. So that was interesting, yeah.
I can imagine them losing such a large portion of their existing clientele, so to speak, and obviously being worried about the loss of the actual organisation itself being so large. But that's part of the problem, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure the organisation functions well and properly, and everyone has their voice as they should. But fundamentally, when you have populated areas, even in this instance of having 20 votes and over-representation possibly to do with the fact that it's more concentrated in population where they actually are, it doesn't necessarily mean that the votes at the end of the result, like this one, was probably warranted for what the people actually wanted. Just like we have on a state-by-state election basis, where the 17 representatives from, Rockhampton up don't adequately get to voice the opinions and needs and wants of everybody that's necessarily up above. But look, it's a shame, because I remember as a younger man, I think at the time it was Val Shear who might have been the mayor of Cairns, And, I remember she was one of the only people that said that she wasn't interested in the idea. It was something like one of two mayors that in the central and northern regions. Do you remember the two? Was it something like that? Was there only one or two mayors that were against the notion?
Oh, look, yeah, I think there was. Sometimes elected people are frightened to be real. I'm the longest serving mayor in Queensland. I've been the mayor for 23 years or something, and 28 years in local government. So I've been to a lot of elections, some opposed, some unopposed. But, if you're going to lead anybody, if you're going to make a statement, you have to be transparent, you have to be accountable, and you have to have faith. And you have to have faith in what you're doing. And people will support you. If you can tell them the reasons you're making those decisions, they will support it. And I've seen a lot of councillors and mayors come and go in my life because they don't tell the facts. I'm not saying they tell lies. I'm just saying they don't tell the facts. And sometimes when a ratepayer will say, well, you haven't sealed my road. And if you go there and say, well, we're not going to seal your road, we'll put the new water mains underneath it next year and then we'll seal your road. Because why would you seal your road? And they say, oh, yeah, that's logical. That's common sense. So you explain that to people. And and I've been to conferences and we talked about a new state, and some mayors will run away and I don't want to talk about it. They're not there anymore. And it may not been for that reason, but it's unless you are prepared to debate what you believe in, people won't trust you to be the leader. So, you can't just run with the hares and hunt with the hounds. Crows that sit on fences get shot off. So you have to take one side or the other. And unfortunately, a lot of elected leaders, they start to build relationships, and that's a great idea. Don't worry, I'm not being critical of that. But they build relationships with people in Brisbane, not their people they look after in Northern Australia. So they're the most important things, the people that you serve. We serve, all elected people serve the community, and your people come first. So if your people are saying, well, why aren't we getting the right road funding? Why are they spilling in millions down there? And you say, well, big population, blah, blah, blah. However, we are providing a product that was needed to go out of their ports. So we should have good roads too. And I think that's where we fail. We don't put across the GDP that we in Northern Australia create out of very few people.
Well said, mate. And you know what? A true testament to the fact that as a local representative of 23 years, the truth and the actual compassion and conviction to want to do well for the community should see you through. And look, it's just a fact of life in current days where politics isn't necessarily like that. Like you say, far off relations and so I don't want to use the term backroom deals, but I guess status quos are made when it's not in the best interest for the people that representatives should probably be thinking of first. And look, mate, the simple fact that you've been the mayor of Richmond for 23 years says it all. And with conviction, we can only hope that representation, which we do lack to get that proper funding for roads and infrastructure, and to ensure that our local communities can thrive through economic prosperity, lies in the fact that we've got to get rid of a system that only gives us 17 seats out of 93. And look, I guess fundamentally, time will tell. Hopefully more Jenny Hills come out the water, and you'll have far more people standing behind you back in the months and years to come leading up to the next state election than you ever have. And we can only hope that we have more success on it. Bill, have you got any thoughts on today's events from Bob Catter talking down there in Canberra on the idea in response to Jenny Hill and Jenny Hill on the front page of the Bulletin itself?
Yeah, it's pleasing that Jenny's come out with the statement. It's been a long time coming, and it's certainly a departure from her political base, which is basically the ALP, which has never really been in favour of it. But I would expect that the situation probably is council continues to be behind the eight ball all the time on water security, and it doesn't seem to ever that sort of problem never seems to go away. And I would suggest maybe there's some realisation there now that we're not going to get ahead under the status quo. And I suppose that might have brought about some of the change, because we've got a system where they find it easy to find $6 billion to build a tunnel down in the southeast Queensland, but they can't find $1 billion to build a dam. And the difference between those sort of projects is, one doesn't generate any wealth. It might save commuters, a few minutes on their travel time, but it gives you a big expense and a long-term liability that usually you're subsidising those people who are going on that transport. Whereas $1 million spent on an irrigation system or a dam or that actually generates new wealth. And I think that's the vast difference of a southeast Queensland project versus a big spend in Central and North Queensland. There's complete difference in the wealth creation. And as John was alluding to, Central and North Queensland, of the seed merchandising exports, I think it runs out of about $79 billion a year out of Queensland. And $65 billion of that comes from Central and North Queensland. And even a lot of the stuff that goes out of Brisbane is still product that actually comes out of Central and North Queensland but goes out through the Port of Brisbane. So everything done in Central and North Queensland in investing dollars in is more likely to generate wealth than what it is in southeast Queensland. So that's the big difference in the projects thing. And if I could just touch on Bob Catter's press release today. A lot of people have got a lot of respect for Bob, and even I have a reasonable amount of respect for him, but I still continue, for a person who has been a bit of at the forefront of talking about a separate North Queensland state, you still wonder how much research in that he has actually done, because his statement today in the press conference is talking about he wants a referendum for a separate territory of North Queensland, not a state, but a territory, to take place in the next local government elections in 2024. The ballot should ask North Queensland residents whether they want to become a territory as the first step to statehood, and he believes this will easily get the majority votes. And most importantly, we will still be able to today play state of origin with Queensland. Now, no disrespect, but we're talking here about a proposition that can lead to the greatest improvement of the opportunities for people in Central and North Queensland, and we're hanging and we're going to put it in abatement just so we can continue to play a game of football. Give us a break.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right, Bill, and that's what a few people come up with. They take this discussion about a new state sort of really cheaply. It's not about a football game. It's about the economic development of our community, and it's about democracy really at work, because when you're all being governed from 2,000 k's away, democracy cannot work. It doesn't work. And the sooner we keep this thing rolling, and you guys have done a lot of good work on this, and I commend you for that. But now we've got a few bigger players coming on, and as I said before, some pretty high-level people in Senate and everything else are starting to declare that they are a Northern State supporter. It's just so simple. It's not rocket science. You can get to your government, you can talk to your government. For anyone out in Western Queensland to talk to the state, we're away for a week. You by the time you get in a car and drive to Townsville, catch a plane and fly to Brisbane, have a meeting and come back, it's 3 or 4 days every time. That's what a good thing came out of COVID was Zoom. We can have Zoom meetings, but you still have to have face-to-face. And that's why I think local government works very well, because people can come and talk directly to you about their issues. and you can address them. But when you've got to travel down there and line up meetings, obviously I think council will be a good base for if we had a North in our state to have a parliament. But we don't need a lot of people to run government in a new state. People are saying, oh, you need this, you need that. Well, that's not right. We don't need a huge bureaucracy, and this is where a lot of it goes wrong. And I see local government do it too, where they build big bureaucracies around them, and suddenly, they realise, wow, we've got a lot of administration costs and not getting them too many rates in, and suddenly people get sacked. So it's better to plan way ahead and have people actually have a good day's pay, for a good day's work. And bureaucracies are killing us. I have no doubt about that. And I don't think their workload's that heavy in a lot of places. But and I'm not being critical of those people. I'm just saying that's the way the system's working towards build a lot of government staff. And we had our own government in northern Queensland. You wouldn't need too many people to run us, and it'd be very straightforward. And the other thing is, some of the policies that they go through down in the southeast, particularly the bushfire stuff, is just total rubbish. That wouldn't happen up here. And we'd have cleared lines. We protect our assets well and truly before that starts. And these people all want to move into the forest down there and live in the forest. Well, you want to go into the forest, you will get burned, because that's been going on for thousands of years in Australia. And big lightning strike at the end of the month, end of November, December, and you're going to get burnt. So if you don't clear trees and take the timber away, you will get burnt if you want to live in the forest. And up here, we don't get those big fires out here, and I don't hear of too many north of Rocky that aren't controlled. I think it's the policies that we work through, the decisions that the state and federal and local members make that people are contented with. And that Fraser Island one is just bloody crazy stuff going on there. Anyway.
Yeah, well, that's you've touched on an interesting point there, and I guess we'll just touch on it before we go ahead and talk, because I believe you want to talk about the State of the North report that's just recently come out. But I mean, even when it comes to policies and legislation that's coming out of the southeast corner, when it comes to farm management, land management, burn off and fuel load reduction management, all sorts of things like that, when it's being passed and legislated in the southeast corner to be implemented in Central and North Queensland and the surrounding regions around, that it's absolutely absurd when the people who know best how to manage their local environment around them are the local communities. I mean, if you were to go up and tell the local Indigenous communities how to go ahead and know you can't do any fuel reduction burns throughout the year, I think they'd laugh at you and then wait for you to get on your plane or get in the car and go off and then do it anyway. And I wouldn't blame them, because they understand the land better than they ever would. And the simple premise behind the fact that for somebody to come out and tell you how to manage a local area, an environment that you live on, you have been born on, and your children have grown up in, and all of those other premises, is actually absolutely absurd. Not just for the component of protection of property and land, but the premise behind somebody coming out and telling you how do you live your life and keep your assets safe is just absurd. And it's the same sort of things that happen in California over in the United States. It's absolutely absurd to say, no, you're not allowed to cut down any trees, you're not allowed to do any reduction in burning, and all of a sudden you have Hinchinbrook Island. And I actually saw that on one of the subjects we put on our Facebook page at bootbrisbane.com, there was actually a person who commented who said he was a former ranger on Hinchinbrook Island, and he just said, I'm glad I'm not involved there anymore, because I'm just trying to remember the comment off the top of my head. He said, because at least we were smart about the reduction in policies, and as I was leaving, they were starting all this draconian thing about not touching any of the wildlife or flora or fauna in regards to just letting nature be nature. And then all of a sudden, what do you know? The whole lot's in flames, and it's just sad, isn't it? But look, John, why don't we go and we'll talk briefly now about the State of the North report that you mentioned before we started tonight's podcast that you wanted to mention. It's a report that's just come out, you said, and do you want to give us a rundown of basically its findings and some interesting information you discovered in it.
Yeah, right, sure, David. So how this eventuated back in 2017, Christopher Pine and Josh Frydenberg asked me if I would set up a CRC for developing Northern Australia. It was a new idea. You know, the CRCs for a lot of industries, and this was one for developing Northern Australia, focused on agriculture and health and traditional owner-led businesses. And so they gave me some consultants and some staff, and I travelled around Northern Australia, basically starting at Rocky and Townsville, Cairns, Broome, Darwin, down at Port Hedland, Mount Isa, Cloncurry, Emerald, and so basically across Northern Australia on a consultation process. And came back with what I thought and gave it to them. And so then they formed a CRC for developing Northern Australia, and Sheridan Morris is our chair, and I'm on the board. And there's a number of board members on that, from Peter Long and Karratha. Tracy Hayes from Darwin was on it. She's just now stepped down, and some other people are on it. But there's about 7 on the board, and we're represented right across Northern Australia. And one of the big issues that's come from life experience for some of the board members was impediments to development. And so we got the CRC going, and we got these projects all running along. And I brought it up early in the year, and I said, look, you know, that everywhere you go, you hear about the Gilbert River development, you know, farming on the Gilbert. And great spot, you know, the ability to farm there's great. But the state government have got a policy about vegetation management. You can't knock a tree down. So straight away, you've got this case where they're promoting the irrigation and the farming development and the dry farming development on the Gilbert River. But the government is saying, well, yeah, we'll give you a water licence, but, you know, you can't knock your trees down. So how the hell are you going to develop a farm if you can't knock a tree down? Now, the trees in Northern Australia aren't of substance. You know, we got millions and millions and millions of acres of tea tree and of coolybars and of bloody boxwoods and all the eucalypts you can name. And you know what? They all regenerate. They all grow again. And so that was one of the issues. The other one was tenure, and tenure's a big one. So we had an issue with the Queensland government sold water licences out of the Flinders River to properties that got pastoral lease. Now, on pastoral lease, you can't do anything until you get native title cleared. So we put all this in the State of the North report, saying these are the impediments that, you know, that stop you developing. So, okay, pastoral lease are usually big properties, like 100 to 200,000 acre properties. And most of Northern Australia is pastoral lease. Around where I am, there's a lot of freehold and grazing homestead perpetual leases, which are fine. But when you get into the northern country, where you can actually dry farm crops like rice, grain, sorghum, because it's a higher rainfall area, it's pastoral lease. So you think, well, why don't we, and we put this in the State of the North report, why not, if a bloke's got 200,000 acres pastoral lease, why don't you make it simpler for him to just take off 10,000 acres and farm that? Because that's all he needs. He's not never going to farm 200,000 acres. But if you said, let's make it simple, but it's not. It's not simple. And that's another reason why we need a new state, because the bureaucrats and the politicians you'll be talking to could be on the ground and see the issues and understand what's going on and say, well, look, okay, that's it. That's pretty straightforward. It's just a policy change, bit of legislation, and you make the show happen. And we are being held back by all of these impediments, and the list goes on. The timber industry. The timber industry in Northern Australia could be a big industry because everything that we grow up here regenerates, but it's on pastoral lease, so you can't go and cut timber on it. And most country that's freehold or GHPL doesn't really have timber on it. You're getting into open downs country. It's never been cleared. So they're the sort of things that came out of the State of the North report, and it's now starting to be, and JC Angus from Claremont put an article in the Register this week about the government addressing that, because it's still happening, and nearly all these issues are state, because when you're dealing with soil and water, you're talking about state issues. So there are little impediments that continue to hold back our development, and yet all this happened in New South Wales, southeast Queensland 100 years ago. They cleared all that, if you'd want to drive from Brisbane to Bay Desert and see all that beautiful farming country, that was all tall timber. They knocked it down and made productive land out of it. So, but we can't do that anymore. And it's sad. It's just sad.
Are we here to pay for their sins?
I think we are, Bill.
Just touching on the timber in North Queensland. I mean, I did a big trip back in 2017 when I was first mucking around with this idea of a North Queensland state. And I travelled up the Weipa and across to Georgetown, Normanton, and then back via the Cloncurry, Wharton, Richmond, Julia Creek. And one of the things I did notice, because I did go past the Gilbert River, and but for a person who's never been out there before, I mean, you're driving from Georgetown, and it's pretty boring landscape. And then all of a sudden you hit the Gilbert River, and there's all this greenery and mango trees, and you think, what's this? There's some sort of oasis I've never heard of, and it's just amazing. And then you go past the Gilbert River, and you're back to sort of, gee whiz, another boring piece of landscape sort of thing. But when did we become so fastidious, or when did trees become so sacred that we can't actually cut them down? Something that's basically renewable all the time. But the worst thing is what we've got especially up on the peninsula that I've seen, we've got this continual regrowth of these, I don't know what you call them, I call them striplings, and they're just, for every 10 square metres, I suppose, there might be 30 or 40 or more of these, 2-inch striplings are growing up. And, cattle could probably hardly have a tough time getting through there. But one of the things they don't seem to take account of is these eucalyptus, small, thin, stripling trees that are about no use to anyone. The leaves actually kill the ground below them in regards to the grass. It's as though they've completely forgotten the importance of grass versus the use of trees. I mean, high density areas where you've got, maybe 600 of these saplings or whatever you want to call them per acre sort of thing, you can just look at the ground, and there's almost no topsoils because the eucalyptus leaves has killed any chance of grass there, and so you just get this barren sort of land that gets washed away or broken up. So,
well, I'll just say,
where did we go wrong?
Well, I'll tell you where we went wrong is the lack of fire, and fires get put out pretty quickly now. But there's a lot of landholders now are realising that the old fires, you could never put a fire out before we had graders. And graders came along in the 70s. And before that, you had to fight fires with water. And fires would roar every start of the wet season when the storms came. There'd be a big body of feed. And fires actually were good. And we need more fires for a lot of northern Australia. And so what happens, those fires will kill those saplings. And that's when we had a lot of open timber, and you're dead right. Before that, you could drive a Toyota through a lot of that ironbark country, a lot of eucalypt, boxwood country, gooliebark country, Bohemia, all that sort of country. When I was a kid growing up, you could drive a Toyota through those paddocks, but you couldn't beat the fires. Then the fires got controlled, and now people have come to full circle and realise that the timber, the vegetation is taken over. And so before that, the last couple of 100 years, a fire could start in Longreach at the end of the year in a big season and burn right through to Corumba. no trouble at all. No one could stop it. You didn't have the facilities to stop it. But a lot of them are going back now to control fires and burning just due to vegetation. It's taken over. And it is killing the grass. There's no doubt about that. The open timberland, open country, grows a lot more grass. Can't get any sun in the other stuff.
Is this one of those weird stories, gentlemen, where it's like, you know, just at large in a general sense that we're victims of our own technological advancement, where a grader being able to help us create fire breaks is essentially creating a problem in its own right? Is it one of those sort of strange, but I guess I don't mean to be cynical, but moments where you're like, wow, just when you think you solve one problem, you create a whole set of others? Is that an unfair statement to sort of...
I think it's...
No, I think you're pretty right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
crazy. Sorry, Bill?
I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair because it's much better that we run controlled fires all the time. Otherwise, we lose stock and things like that. But the whole point, the technology, we've got the technology now that we can put in brakes and burn off in consistent patterns and on a regular basis. But the problem is we've got legislators who don't let us do that. I mean, we solved the problem, but legislators have created a new problem by not letting us use the new technology to our advantage. So,
one of the problems.
Point, Bill. My point more is like, as soon as the technology came about, like John said in the 70s, everyone went, well, this is great. I don't want to fire anymore to rip through the land anymore. But as time has progressed and we realise the importance of those fires and we have the ability to manage them more effectively, like you say, Bill, we have that ability to now adjust the parameters in which we would put those said fire breaks, and the government steps in to make it even more difficult. And I guess that was more my thought on how it's a bit of a, you can't help but grin and smile and go, it's just a funny thing, isn't it?
Well, one of the problems is when you've got populated areas and they all want to live in the timber, and someone starts to do an early season burn, they then ring the council and complain about smoke. So you've got, you know, the people that are trying to regulate the burns so they don't have a fierce fire in November, December or in the summer, and trying to take away some of that fuel. They're told by the local authorities to go and put it out because these people don't want smoke in their nose. Well, you know, it's either smoke in your nose or you get a real big one that comes and burns a whole lot down. That's the problem.
And which would you prefer?
That's right.
And usually these people have either come up from the southeast Queensland or Sydney or Melbourne for the lifestyle, and they're mucking things up because it's against their sensitivities.
Well, I get back to being transparent about the whole decision that when these people do turn up, or if they are complaining about the fire, someone. And probably an elected councillor who represents that region should go out and say, well, we're going to do this burn in April or May, so you don't get completely burnt out in November. And normally when you explain to people, and I think this is the issue nowadays, that no one actually spends the time to talk to people and say, look, this is the reason why we made this decision. And when you tell them that, they say, oh, okay. Oh, that's not a bad idea. All right, well, we'll just move away for a day while you know, have a bit of a burn off and get rid of the fuel. And I think people, even though we communicate so well on social media, and there's a lot of warriors out there, but they still don't understand it until you actually point it out to them that, you know, their house could burn down if we don't do this early in the year.
Well, I think it's a simple breaking down of the, do you want the more immediate inconvenience now of the smoke in your face, or do you want the greater inconvenience in 6 months' time? And I think that's where the conversation needs to be broken down in a face-to-face manner, like you say, John. I think that's the biggest component about communication that you're touching on that's lacking. I think just because you receive a bit of information through things like social media these days, that doesn't necessarily mean people are taking it on board in a fashion that you could in a 5-minute conversation face-to-face. Would you agree?
That's right. Definitely.
Yeah, yes, and I look, as somebody who's represented their local community for 23 years, it's obviously a testament to the fact that your face-to-face communication must be paramount in the local community, and if things have been going on swimmingly for the fact that you at the helm in the area of Richmond has gone about well, just because of your attitude towards that sort of thing like communication. It's obviously a good indicator of what some other leaders in the Central and North Queensland area might be lacking. But I guess we've had several guests over the last couple of months. We've danced around this subject as well, and we get some instances where even in smaller communities up north, like Port Douglas and the Daintree, no less, where I guess it's a sentiment that they bring up with them from more southern areas, which is a little bit anti-development as well, and it's a little bit on what we're talking about. But we've had instances where people would avidly say that, say Port Douglas, for example, I moved here from Brisbane because I liked it. It's a sleepy little town, and I don't want it to change. And it's like, well, why did you move her in? It's the irony abounds when you might hear someone say that is anti-development, having moved to Port Douglas in the first place. It's like, so now that you're here, it should all stop, should it? So everything should remain the same. No one else should see that this is a fantastic place to come and live, and that's it.
Well, it's always a problem, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, John. Yeah, go.
Yeah, I think it's always a problem where you're dealing with that, and they turn up in your community, particularly the really nice communities along the coast there, and they just love it the way it is. But they don't bring any children with them looking for jobs. They don't care whether the school's got no kids and we're going to lose staff. They just want to have a sleepy little hollow to retire in. But the people that have been there all the time, they want kids in the school. They want jobs that those kids, when they leave school, can go to. They want that development. And this is where councils have got to manage that issue on a constant basis, and we've still got to keep changing all the time. We can't just sit there and do nothing, because you will go backwards very rapidly. And continual change is so important. And obviously it's a nice community. That's why they sold up and moved to that community, and they want to live there. But they've got to accept that when they do come there's going to be change.
Well, for the betterment of the community, is part of the reason why they moved there. And look, Central and North Queensland, as well as all the other remote regional areas of Australia, have something to bring to the table when it comes to the way that our country is. And the fact that, especially in Central and North Queensland, our smaller communities, and I'm sure you could attest to this, I don't know the specifics to Richmond itself, but they're dwindling. And with the young people in smaller communities, and we have them riddled from Cairns all the way down to Townsville, smaller places like Innisfail, the kids have got nothing to do and nowhere to go, and they're looking at no prospects. And the simple fact of the matter is without any avenue to avidly go to the local mill and get a job, have plenty of jobs or plenty of opportunity to get an apprenticeship, or a bustling retail sector in the CBD. And don't get me wrong, we could all have our opinions on retail. But the point is, without a diverse industry in our local community, it is going to dwindle down to nothing. And I think that's ultimately what we're, I guess, at bars with at the moment. We're under constant attack from legislation which is making every single aspect of agriculture, the backbone of Central and North Queensland, and farming more difficult to do, which is in turn creating its own issue of making it harder for young people to want to stay. There's no prosperity, no economic opportunity. Of course our population is going to dwindle, and obviously without the creation of a new state, so is our representation. Would you have any thoughts on the fact that, look, we need to take a stand against this, and the sooner the better in regards to our local community suffering in that manner, John?
Oh, definitely, David. What you said is right on the money. I got two grandkids, just one just graduated from school, and the other one's at uni already. They're both moving to Brisbane because there's greater opportunities there than Townsville. So, that's what happens. Everyone gravitates to where the opportunities are. We had our own state. We focus on our own opportunities, and as you said earlier, we are definitely punching above our weight as far as GDP is concerned. So we're not too concerned about the wealth. I'm not concerned about anything. I've been in local government a long time, and you could run a state no different than a local government, and it wouldn't be hard to do. I don't have any concerns at all about it. They talk about big payroll tax down in Brisbane. Well, great. Payroll tax is not going to change the economy. Agriculture and mining is what saw us through the COVID, and from the Prime Minister to the State Premier, will admit that straight away. They're the industries we should be looking after, and everything that flows off that. But retail is so important. Those good shops are so important, and good educational facilities, and that's where they build them in Brisbane because that's where the population is. But if we had our own state, well, we'd build them up here, wouldn't we?
Well, that's of course, and that's right. And look, and it's about that distribution of representation, and that's fundamentally where all our problems lie. The new state solves that. I mean, I remember specifically talking to one person that I was just in a general conversation. I think it might have been over a beer with one of my mates who wanted to know more about it. He didn't think it was a great idea, and I said, well, mate, if you lived on a street, right, and everyone had the same size block, and everyone had a sort of vote on how the street should be run, that would be fine, wouldn't it? And he said, yeah. I said, well, if you lived in an apartment complex and everyone in the apartment complex had one vote in a body corporate, you'd think that's great, wouldn't you? That's fair, yeah. And then I said, well, they said, yeah, that's great. I said, well, now put the apartment block on the street and give everyone a vote. Doesn't necessarily work out, does it? That's not democracy, because you're going to have one block of land with a highly concentrated amount of people outvoting the rest of the street. And they went, oh. And it takes little instances like that for people to understand that the concentration and the representatives of the more populated areas in the southeast corner are essentially what's killing us. We need to be real.
Right. Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's not being critical about those people that are doing that. It's just the way we've gone, and they represent a certain population, so they get more bloody votes in Parliament than we do. And yep.
Yeah, well, I guess we've touched on several subjects around the fact that has led us to this situation. And Bill, I'll put it to you about the fact that, I mean, all this encapsulating the fact that with the end of the Joh Bjelke-Petersen era, with the Fitzgerald inquiry getting rid of it wasn't really a gerrymander per se, but the structure of the Queensland electorates and having a more condensed representative area for the whole of the Central and North Queensland regions, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people reflect on the period of the golden years for the Queensland going ahead, and especially regional Queensland, because that's when we got our Cairns International Airport. That's when we got the Burdekin Dam, and we got the development of the Galilee Basin. But the big factor there was the system of malapportionment of voting, where you could have electorates in the major built-up areas like in Cairns and Townsville and Brisbane having 15,000 odd voters, but by the time you get out to areas like around Charters Towers and sort of Hughenden and that, you had the seat of Flinders with only 5,000 voters. And so you had a system where you had, in the 80s, you had an 82-seat parliament, but Central and North Queensland had 24 seats, and Southwest Queensland had several seats. So regional Queensland had more seats than the Brisbane area. So that's why the regions did so well in those areas. But as soon as we went back to and the thing is, people keep talking about it as a Bianchi mandate, but that system came in under the Hanlon government in 49, the Labor government. And it was just that as time went by, and eventually when Joh got in, he perfected the system. So he got the name Bianchi mandate sort of took hold, but it wasn't his system originally. But now, after the Fitzgerald inquiry, we've gone back to one value, one vote. And I think, as I've just got a story in front of me from the Queensland Register, Richmond Mayor John Wharton advocates for a North Queensland state, and it's dated 24th of March 17, and that's just after the redistribution that saw South East Queensland get an additional 4 seats, and the Parliament went up to 93, and Central and North Queensland was left with 17. And that's the situation. If we stay with this status quo, there will be another redistribution in 2024, because it's usually every 8 years, and we could have a situation where we have there's probably be another 400 or 500,000 people in the voting system, because Queensland's population's gone ahead, and you won't be able to just redraw the borders. You're going to have to add additional seats. And we'll have the situation, well, you know, if it goes up by another 4 seats in the southeast Queensland, we might even lose seats because our population is only increasing at half the rate of southeast Queensland. So we just are not keeping up with the population growth to maintain those seats. So we've got to be very careful in the future. But just touching on another thing, one of the big things about having a separate state is the 12 senators that we get going to Canberra and batting for us and our industries in Canberra. And I think that's one of the greatest advantages for a new state is that extra capital in our nation's capital by having those 12 senators working for us and our industry.
Definitely right.
I think people need to understand the ability for those 12 representatives to go and convey the needs and wants of the local communities up here would ultimately be the most economic benefit, the most beneficial economically to the whole of the nation in general. Because the more prosperous Central and North Queensland is, the more prosperous the nation is going to become. And I guess, look, all we see is mounting debt from the state government. Is mounting debt, and it's being burdened upon the local communities of Central and North Queensland. We're the areas that are going to try and pay this off over the years to come. And unless we can just really reevaluate our relationship in the current status quo of the state of Queensland and how we should go about our own destiny and create economic prosperity, not just for ourselves but for the whole of the nation in general. 12 senators is just one component of that. It becomes more clear the more we talk about it in that sense. Because, I mean, John, you've obviously made several trips down to Canberra as a local representative, as well as in the organisations that you were a part of. The general feel, obviously, you've said a couple of senators have started to come out talking about the issue and that they support it. But where do we go from here when it comes to the representation we currently have in Canberra and on this topic of Central North Queensland possibly one day having our own representatives in the Senate? More representatives, I should say.
Well, I think it's fair. If Tasmania can have their own 12 senators, why can't we? Anyone that's thinking fair and thinking, well, this is righteous, this should happen, the population is there to do this, to make a new state. This is where we need politicians to buddy step up to the table and say, well, I'm going to vote for it because it's fair. These people deserve their right, they deserve their shot at democracy. And I think we keep talking about it. Unfortunately, in all these any government things, it all takes time. But there's more and more people coming on board, which was obvious today in the front page of the Townsville Bulletin. The other thing I'd like to say, David, is insurance. And insurance, and I'm mounting a campaign on this right now, actually, with a federal senator. Insurance in Northern Australia, and we all know about it, we are being cruel because we have cyclones, because we have floods. But I tell you what, there's a lot of Northern Australia doesn't have cyclones, doesn't have floods. And we're pushing for a Northern Australia, basically, insurance company, a mutual type insurance company, because they'll go down to Brisbane and they'll insure them for bugger all, and they'll charge, once you get north of Mackay, everyone's paying a huge amount of money for their insurance policies. And there's a lot of people now, for the feedback I'm getting, is a lot of people aren't even insured anymore. They just say, oh, bugger it. So, that's where we miss out again. We had our own state, we'd be right. We'd have our own insurance company. We'd have, like the old SGIO. And SGI was sold off for a lot of money. Insurance is a big one for us up here. We get hammered, and they get looked after down there. So
yeah, look, it's definitely one of those sore talking points that you could just about relate to any single person on, whether it's the wealthy business owners and property portfolio owners, or whether it's just a person struggling along with their own property like myself. Because I can tell you one thing for certain is insurance is one of those things. just election after election. I mean, we've been promised the world when it comes to lower insurance premiums, and here we are, possibly 15 years later, still absolutely reeling every time we have to open an envelope when it comes from the insurance company. And I mean, not to anyone's discredit, but we've even had our local, one of the local representatives of the Liberal National Party here, Warren Inch, trying to do good things on it, but still not necessarily making much headway. And that's the premise that we're under here, is like, even if he was to devote his single, Moby Dick thing of trying to slay the white whale of high insurance premiums in Central and North Queensland, I don't think he could get very far. He just doesn't have the political oomph that a new state would possibly have to just adequately sit down and solve the problem. And look, it's one small component of a great many that we could possibly just solve within one election cycle if we would only have our own sovereignty and our own parliament to be able to solve these things. So, look, gentlemen, we've just approached an hour too. So I guess to wrap up this evening's show, I was going to put a question to both of you as well, but I'll get your answer first, John. Look, we've just had our state election. We've just had a return of the Labor government. We've just had the Treasury basically tell us that we're in excess of, or we're heading towards $150 billion debt, and things are looking good, allegedly, coming out of this whole COVID year that we've had. It's been a year of disruption. No one could argue against that, no matter what aspect of life you're concerned with. But where do we go from here, John? What lies in the next 4 years for us, leading up to the next state election, and the mood of the people coming out of this year? Because, I mean, another topic we could talk about as well, in parallel with insurance premiums, is the fact that many people are upset, I'm sure they are out there at Richmond, about the fact that we had to manage the amount of people at a gathering when not many COVID cases were necessarily in our local communities, but they might have been concentrated in the southeast corner. What are your thoughts on where we go as local communities up here, and the future of this whole debate of a new state for Central and North Queensland?
Oh, well, David, I think it depends on the state government and the ministers that are involved in, and I can only talk about the northwest out here where we are, and agriculture and mining is the king for us. And towns like Richmond, Huon and Georgia Creek, they service the mining industry, they service the agricultural industry. I'm not sure, once again, if anyone's aware, but north of the towns of the Mount Isa railway line, there's 8 million head of cattle. I mean, that is the calf factory for the rest of Australia. And, we live in an area where, and cattle, where I'm getting to is cattle prices are very strong. So the industry is in a good state. It can change rapidly, for sure. But if we've got ministers that are relative to mining and agriculture and water development, I think we'll be going along quite well. And there is ministers in the Labor government that are very switched on to development. And but they, unfortunately, they live in Brisbane where they're ruled by some of the Greenies, and that's a bit of an issue. But if they give that all away, and I just think things might be okay. I think moving forward for the next 4 years, I think a bit of positivity is going to come out of it. And it's basically about dealing with those relative ministers. They can make or break the development of an area, and we're quite positive out here moving forward. And but I'd much rather see us in our own state.
Oh, well said, mate. Well said. I guess that's a topic for another podcast altogether, about the fact that we're littered in Central and North Queensland with what could essentially be Brisbane's man or woman in Richmond or in Cook or in Cairns, as opposed to Cairns' woman or man in Brisbane. And I mean, the two big parties let us down in so many ways when it comes to those caucuses and those meetings that they have as a party, and I guess that's part of the problem as well. Should we have a new state, even if we were to continue the same sort of system? At least it would be a system where every representative drove down the highway with agriculture either side at some point, and that's an exciting prospect indeed. Bill, what are your thoughts, especially after today, and how we can lead up into the next election cycle in the state, and how we take this to the people, that this is definitely the way to go?
Well, just aside of the separate state issue, I think we'll go to the next election complaining about the same things that we've been complaining about the last 10 years. Juvenile crime, lack of development, no Coranda road improvement, no dams built, all the same things. And the other thing that's got to stress is, while it might be only a small gain, the Greens in southeast Queensland, in Brisbane, have now got 2 seats. They now have twice the time to ask questions and put proposals through into that parliament. They are going to continue to sort of push the agenda where of environmental things in regions that they know absolutely nothing about, but just on the ideology that comes through either the Conservation Society or the Marine Conservation Society, and it's not, our fishermen are not going to have any joy, and I don't think our farmers are going to have any joy with regulations that are going to continue to come out of Brisbane. So I think that's what I see the next 4 years being, is just same old, and the same old bashing of farmers and fishermen and primary producers. I suppose the other thing is, at least now with China being such a pain, there may be a re-emphasis on at least getting a secondary industry going in Australia, especially making steel or something like that. I think there has to be a change there, and maybe an emphasis on things like the Project Iron Boomerang that we had Shane Condon on some months ago, with the feasibility of bringing iron ore across to Bowen and coal across to Karratha or Port Hedland, and steel plants on both sides of the continent. So maybe that's innovative things that we've got to look for, hopefully happen in the next, at least get a start in the next 4 years. But I don't expect any good things to come out of Brisbane. I think it's just got to be the same old, same old.
No, they're too busy worried about tunnels under the rivers and trains linking up the Gold Coast with the CBD to remotely think about nation-building projects like Iron Boomerang, I dare say. Not to sound like a cynic, but I think it's just the world that we currently live in now, when we're faced with the current development of things and the concentrations of the Queensland Parliament. And look, it's a shame. It's a shame that so much opportunity can be wasted, and it's a shame that the local communities of Central and North Queensland are essentially the ones that suffer the most at it. But it is what it is, and we need to change it. And hopefully, leading up to the next election cycle, wonderful representatives like John and hopefully Jenny Hill as well are taking this to the people to say that this has been a subject for too long on our tongues, that we should implement a procedure in which we get to have the vote, and everyone has their say, and hopefully united we can make a new line on the map, and hopefully we can do things like Iron Boomerang. Johnny, just quickly, you're obviously, I'm assuming that you're well acquainted with Iron Boomerang. Are you acquainted with that project?
Yeah, I am, David, and I'm also acquainted with a proposal to put a standard gauge line between Townsville and Mount Isa, and federal government, they're looking at that right now to fund that feasibility, which obviously, of course, would be then a connection to Tennant Creek, but Mount Isa to Townsville, standard gauge, straight into the port of Townsville. I'm not sure how that'll go, but it definitely will carry some freight. And there's a big copper mine just been found between west of Mount Isa out in the Territory. There's a lot of activity going on in the mining industry out there, and the potential is huge. So right across that corridor to Tennant Creek, and I know about that, and I totally agree. We need some nation-building projects, and we need to get off our arse and make these happen, as you said. The amount of money to Cross River Tunnel to save 15 minutes in the motor car. And it's funny how what's come out of COVID is that people are going to stay home and work. So do we need that cross river tunnel anymore? Because there's going to be a lot of population in the city aren't going to move into the city to work anymore.
Yeah, all said too late, I imagine. So I guess it's there now, and it's not like they're going to stop the project based on that as much as we wish it. And look, I guess we just got to stare down the barrel of $150 billion in debt and just realise we got to get rid of these guys. We've got to get rid of the way that they think. We've got to get rid of the way that they want to spend the money that we earn out of the ground, either growing it or mining it, and put some of that to better use, to better economic use in our communities, so that we can prosper and so that the nation can prosper on the back of that. Look, gentlemen, is there any finishing thoughts? We might as well wrap up this evening's thing. We really appreciate you taking an hour out of your evening and your week to join us, John. It's been absolutely fascinating and absolutely wonderful. I love the statistic that you've been a representative now in the local government for 23 years. And I can tell through talking to you that there's no wonder. You're a good communicator, mate, and the people must love you there for everything you do for Richmond. So thank you for joining us. If you want to say a finishing thought, go right ahead.
No, David, look, thank Bill for inviting me to come on and talk about these issues, which, look, I'm a Northern Australian person. I've lived there all my life. I've been 28 years in local government, but I've been 23 as mayor.
Sorry.
And,
right.
Look, I'm passionate about North Queensland, Northern Australia generally, and we have the biggest market sitting up north of us that is just potentially sitting there waiting for us to grow some product that they can buy, and it's so sad. Even our mangoes and horticulture has got to go to Brisbane to be redistributed, and our meat and all that sort of stupid things that go on. And then come back in, go down in a truck and come back in a box and all that sort of stuff. It's just crazy. So,
same with bananas.
Yeah, look at the bananas. That's right. And it's just good to see the Port of Townsville growing rapidly with containers and that sort of thing, because they can be, ports are our big key to our growth, and we just need to be able to have the ability to be unhindered by, and it's all about regulation, it's all about policies with government. That's the biggest hindrance of any agricultural or any development, is dealing with bloody regulation in government, whether it be local, state, not so much federal. Federal's okay, but the state and local government can be a real big hindrance.
Yeah.
That'll do me, David. Thank you.
Yeah. Bill, did you have any finishing thoughts? And
yeah, I'll just finish.
This evening's talk.
Yeah, I'll just finish up on the matter of debt and its rapid rise into the future. The debt's actually a lot worse than people think, because there's so much debt the government's passed over to other entities like South East Water and Ergon and ports and all those sort of things. So there's a lot of hidden debt, but if we do become a separate state, we actually just walk away from that debt. We don't carry that debt with us. The only debt that we'll carry with us is unfunded super for the public servants we take over, and any projects that are underway or contracts have been entered into. We have to accept responsibility for them, but I'm not aware of any multi-billion dollar contracts in Central and North Queensland that the state government's funding. So there obviously won't be too much there. So we'll start with pretty well a clean slate, and I think the best thing about that is the South East will have to clean up its act in regards to managing itself a lot better when it can't depend on money from mining royalties and that to pay their bills. So I think it can only be good.
Is that the case, John? Is there no hidden multi-billion-dollar highway upgrades happening in the Wharton and Richmond Conclary area? Like, was Bill's sort of guess there correct?
Well, a lot of the major road funding in the last couple of years, 80% of that's been from the feds. So
Well, of course,
the states are only paying 20% on a lot of that big road funding. The new Rosie program is 80% feds, and I think Bill's pretty on the money there. I mean, we don't have to take a lot of their debt either if we don't want to,
No, well, I guess that's the point. Imagine the things we could do with the amounts being spent on projects like the Cross River Rail in Central and North Queensland, whether it's dams, whether it's highway upgrades, whether it's putting a large sum of money into projects like Iron Boomerang, like other projects of that nature that could essentially create huge amounts of prosperity to the region, and reaping huge dividends for the future to come. It's just, with the representation that 12 senators would afford, and the more localised parliament that a new state would afford, it would only mean big things for Central and North Queensland. Now, sorry, Bill, were you just about to say something?
No, that's fine. I'll just leave on that note in regards to the debt.
Yeah. Well, no one likes debt, and I guess debt is a fundamental thing that most people are aware of, that they just roll their eyes and don't think much of it. But that's your kids paying that off, mate. That's your kids and possibly their kids. And if they don't have enough of it by the time they reach 20 years old and find a job somewhere else in another state, we've ultimately failed in trying to create a prosperous sort of environment for them to prosper and just live their own lives economically free of the burdens of things like that. And I guess that's where we might. It's a bit of a sad note, but it's a realistic one in the current state of things. With that, I guess a big thank you to you, John, for again taking the time out of your evening and week and joining us for tonight's show. I mean, there's many things we could possibly cover on other subjects at a later date, maybe next year at some point. Thank you again, and we wish you the best of luck going into 2021, and Merry Christmas to you as well in the coming weeks, hey?
Thank you, David, and same back to you and Bill and anyone else that's online there. So we're looking forward to a nice, long, steady wet season out here, and hopefully we don't get the drama we got in February 19, but we've moved on from that, and we've got to keep looking through the windscreen, not the rear vision mirror, haven't we?
That's it. Well, of course, mate. Well said. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Bill, no worries. And Bill, good evening to you as well, hey? Thank you.
Good night, David.
Yeah. So if anyone's listening to this podcast, my name's David Young, signing off for the Boot Brisbane crew up here in Cairns. Thank you for joining us. So you can visit our website, bootbrisbane.com, if you'd like to learn more about the campaign to create a new state for Central and North Queensland. Likewise, we have the sponsor of tonight's show and a sister website, a sister Facebook page, Yes to a North Queensland State, where there's an active community on the subject, and you can interact and learn more about the campaign, as well as just current sort of topical politics when it comes to Central North Queensland that skirt around the unfairness that we experience in Central North Queensland, and how a new state will solve that. If you'd like to learn more or listen to more podcasts of this nature, you can listen to Matt Maloney on Northern Vibe, who has a similar podcast-style Zoom interactive podcast he runs on Monday evening. So you can look that up, Northern Vibe. And Matthew has interesting guests all from all around North Queensland that he interviews. And it's a wonderful thing. So there you go. You can visit our website to learn more, bootbrisbane.com. Visit our Facebook pages, Yes to North Queensland State and bootbrisbane.com. And look, I think we have one more episode next week, and that'll probably wrap it up for this year. So with that, good evening, everybody that may be listening, and good evening again to you, John and Bill. We'll speak to you next time, hey?
Thank you very much.
Good night, David.
I enjoyed it. Good work.
No, that's
Thank
excellent.
you.
Yes, look, you're another first-timer, John. It's been absolutely wonderful. You did great, and you've obviously been introduced to the whole Zoom culture that we're in now, so it was probably easy after all of that.
Yeah, I had Andrew helped me get through it, but yeah, it's all pretty straightforward, isn't it, once you get into it?
Oh, good on you. Thank you to Andrew. I think he might be in the room listening, so thank you again. Well, good evening again, gentlemen. Have a good Christmas, John. Bill, I'll talk to you soon.
Rightio.
Okay, bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.